Kyoji Horiguchi isn't spending much time worrying about the traffic jam at the top of the UFC flyweight division or whether it might delay his path to a title shot. One of the most respected veterans in the lighter weight classes, Horiguchi has already built a career that commands admiration, first during his original UFC run and later through an impressive stretch outside the promotion. Now back in the octagon, his mindset is clear and direct. Keep winning, stay ready, and put himself in position to chase UFC gold, starting with a pivotal matchup against Amir Albazi this weekend. Although some fans see Horiguchi as being in the later stages of his career, his most recent performance suggested he still has plenty left to offer. He looked sharp, fast, and technically sound, showing that he can still pose serious problems for the elite at 125 pounds. That showing reinforced the belief that he is not simply back for a farewell run, but rather for a genuine push toward the top of the division. During his pre-fight media scrum, Horiguchi was asked whether the current logjam around champion Alexandre Pantoja and the top contenders concerns him. His answer was blunt and lighthearted at the same time, as he laughed off the idea of being frustrated by delays. He made it clear that he is comfortable with whatever timeline unfolds, pointing out that there are compelling scenarios either way. Pantoja could continue defending the belt and eventually face him, or Horiguchi could move quickly, win the title himself, and invite the champion to challenge him. For Horiguchi, the real motivation goes beyond belts and scheduling. He wants to answer what he sees as the most important question in the division: who truly is the best flyweight in the world? He explained that training can only show so much and doesn't always reflect reality, which is why he feels the need to prove himself under the bright lights. The only place that question can be answered definitively, in his mind, is inside the cage against the strongest possible opposition. If he can get past Albazi, Horiguchi's confidence suggests he will be ready for whatever comes next, whether that means waiting his turn or being fast-tracked into a title opportunity. Either way, he appears fully prepared to make the most of his return and show that he still belongs among the very best fighters in the UFC flyweight division. Bo Nickal believes the UFC has an easy matchup on its hands for the upcoming White House card, and he thinks Colby Covington is the obvious choice. Nickal has built a reputation for stirring controversy during his MMA rise, and his latest rivalry is with Covington. The two exchanged words during a press conference promoting a Real American Freestyle, or RAF event, where Covington dismissed the idea of fighting Nickal in MMA and said he needed to get in line. Speaking with MMAfighting.com, Nickal pushed back and made his case directly to UFC matchmakers, saying the fight makes sense on multiple levels. Obviously, that's been the plan for me since after my last fight. It would be a great honor to compete on that card. It's going to be historic. Opponent-wise, I'm leaving it up to the UFC, but I think the Colby matchup makes so much sense, especially after the last RAF event and him saying he's moving up to middleweight. That just feels like the fight to make. Nickal also admitted this matchup would be different from his previous fights, which were more business than personal. Up until now, I haven't really had motivation to beat someone specifically. The opponent was just the opponent. This one is a little more personal because of the things he said. I think it would be fun to fight someone I actually want to fight. There's extra motivation there. After starting his pro career 7-0, Nickal suffered his first loss to Reinier de Ridder in May 2025. He bounced back 6 months later with a second-round head kick knockout of Rodolfo Vieira at Madison Square Garden, putting himself back in the conversation as a rising middleweight threat. Covington, meanwhile, has lost his last two UFC fights to Joaquin Buckley and Leon Edwards, though he did earn a dominant freestyle wrestling win over Luke Rockhold at RAF 5 earlier this year. With Covington hinting at a move to middleweight, the matchup with Nickal feels increasingly realistic.
One of Max Holloway's former opponents has raised an intriguing question ahead of the UFC 326 main event, wondering whether Charles Oliveira is truly all in as he prepares for his upcoming title fight with the BMF champion. Holloway is set to defend his belt against Oliveira in a highly anticipated lightweight showdown, one that carries major implications for both men as they chase legacy-defining moments in the later stages of their careers. The UFC 326 headliner pairs Holloway with the former lightweight champion Oliveira, who is aiming to work his way back into title contention after a turbulent stretch. Oliveira is coming off a strong rebound performance, submitting Mateusz Gamrot at UFC Rio after suffering a knockout loss to Ilia Topuria at UFC 317. That win revived his momentum and set the stage for a rematch with Holloway, who handed Oliveira a controversial loss earlier in their UFC tenures when both were competing at featherweight. Despite the clear stakes and the high-profile nature of the fight, former UFC champion Frankie Edgar has publicly questioned Oliveira's mindset heading into the bout. Speaking with MMA Junkie, Edgar suggested that while Holloway appears fully reinvigorated, Oliveira's motivation is harder to read. Edgar pointed out that Holloway seems to be in the middle of a resurgence, particularly since making the move to lightweight full-time. In his view, the cut to featherweight took a toll on Holloway over the years, and fighting at 155 pounds has allowed him to look stronger, fresher, and more dangerous. Edgar contrasted that with Oliveira's long and uneven career arc, noting that before becoming champion, Oliveira experienced plenty of ups and downs. While he acknowledged Oliveira's accomplishments, Edgar questioned whether the same hunger that fueled his championship run is still present. He framed it as a matter of desire, suggesting that Holloway continues to chase greatness with the same intensity, while Oliveira's drive is something he is less certain about. Holloway enters UFC 326 with plenty of motivation of his own. After dominant lightweight wins over Justin Gaethje and Dustin Poirier, he has positioned himself as a legitimate contender for a second UFC title in another weight class. A victory over Oliveira would further solidify his case and keep his championship ambitions firmly alive. For Oliveira, the matchup may represent one of his final opportunities to make a serious push toward the lightweight title again. With that context, UFC 326 could reveal whether the former champion still carries the urgency and hunger that once made him one of the most dangerous finishers in the sport, or whether Holloway's momentum proves too much to overcome.
Jon Jones's return to the octagon continues to hang in the balance after the former two-division UFC champion recently declined a wrestling match with longtime rival Daniel Cormier, citing a serious medical issue that could ultimately end his competitive career. While fans had hoped the renewed tension between Jones and Cormier might lead to a trilogy in wrestling or boxing, Jones made it clear that his physical condition no longer allows him to take part in those kinds of matchups. The situation came to light after footage from the DBX5 event in Houston went viral. In what Jones later described as a private conversation, he revealed that he is suffering from severe arthritis in his hip, an issue that caused significant pain during his most recent fight camp. Jones explained that the condition was discovered while preparing for his last UFC appearance, a camp he pushed through despite constant discomfort, and one that forced him to seriously evaluate how much damage his body has already taken. Following the leak, concerns immediately surfaced about whether Jones could realistically compete again in any combat sport. Speaking to TMZ, Jones confirmed that the diagnosis is legitimate and said the UFC has long been aware of the extent of his arthritis. He added that, like many fighters, he dealt with injuries quietly for years, accepting the physical toll as part of the job while continuing to perform at the highest level. Despite the grim medical outlook, Jones hasn't completely closed the door on one final MMA fight. However, he stressed that if he's going to endure that level of pain again, the opportunity has to be special and meaningful, not just financially lucrative. For Jones, that moment would come in the form of a fight on the proposed UFC White House card, an event he's repeatedly pointed to as the only scenario worth the risk. While UFC CEO Dana White has expressed hesitation about involving Jones in the event, citing past issues and uncertainty surrounding the card, Jones remains hopeful that a deal could still come together. At the same time, he made it clear that he's at peace if it doesn't. Jones described his career as legendary, said he left a huge part of himself inside the octagon, and insisted that even now, with injuries and age catching up to him, he still believes he can outwork and outperform almost anyone, just with a longer warm-up and a bit more care than before. Norma Dumont is in a frustrating spot despite a 6-fight win streak, finding herself with no clear path forward following the cancellation of Kayla Harrison versus Amanda Nunes at UFC 324. The Brazilian contender had hoped that matchup would finally settle the title picture, but Harrison's neck injury, which required surgery for herniated discs, has left everything in limbo, likely delaying the fight until mid-2026. Dumont, 34, made it clear in an interview with MMA Junkie that she had even offered to step in and face Nunes for the belt when Harrison withdrew, but her offer went unaccepted. She believes Nunes opted to wait for Harrison instead, leaving Dumont stuck and frustrated. "I thought Amanda was back to really fight and fight whoever, and now it's all about that little issue they have between old team members, and whatever their problem is, and my career gets stuck because of this, so it's really frustrating," she said. Part of Dumont's frustration stems from the history between Nunes and Harrison at American Top Team. Nunes left ATT in 2022, citing Harrison's presence as a major factor, and both women share former coach Mike Brown. Beyond the top of the division, several ranked fighters are sidelined. Juliana Pena, ranked number 1, is recovering from elbow surgery after losing to Harrison at UFC 316, while number 2, Raquel Pennington, has been out since October 2024 with neck issues. Clean it up, and get new blood in there in place of the people that occupy these rankings and spend a year or 2 years without fighting. That's what keeps everything stuck. In a perfect world, these girls need to move on and give opportunity for new fighters, Dumont said. Dumont last competed in November 2025, edging Ketlin Vieira by split decision at UFC Fight Night 263 to extend her streak. Her run includes wins over Vieira, Irene Aldana, Germaine Durandamy, and Carol Rosa, yet she still has no scheduled opponent or clear path to a title shot. "It's really frustrating, I thought that once Kayla and Amanda fought, then finally it would make the division move forward. For me, it's a tough situation. Juliana's hurt, Raquel's hurt. I have nobody above me that would help me move up that staircase, and we're all stuck. The division's not moving," she explained. Despite the stalled division, Dumont remains focused and committed, continuing to train hard and prepared to take any fight the UFC offers. "It can take time, things can happen, but I guarantee you I will have my opportunity. I'm going to become champ," she stated, underscoring her determination to claim the title regardless of the obstacles. Two-time UFC flyweight champion Brandon Moreno is officially set to compete at UFC Mexico City, and his homecoming will now come against one of the division's more intriguing emerging names. Moreno is moving quickly after his recent setback, eager to re-establish himself in the title picture following a controversial loss to Tatsuro Taira at UFC 323. Originally, the plan was for Moreno to headline the Mexico City card against surging contender Asu Almabayev, a matchup that carried clear implications for the top of the flyweight division. That plan unraveled earlier this week when reports from AG Fight and other outlets confirmed that Almabayev had been forced to withdraw from the bout. While the specific reason for his exit has not been disclosed, the sudden change immediately cast doubt on whether Moreno would remain on the card so close to the event. Given the timing and the importance of the fight, there was concern that the former champion's return in front of his home crowd might be delayed altogether. Instead, Moreno received welcome news as UFC matchmakers moved quickly to secure a replacement opponent and keep him in the main event slot. Moreno is now expected to face Loner Kavanagh, who enters the bout with a professional record of 9-1. The matchup was first reported by MMA journalist Al Zerlino and gives Moreno a fresh but risky challenge just weeks before fight night. Kavanaugh was originally booked to face Bruno Silva in mid-March, but accepted the opportunity to step in on short notice for the biggest fight of his career. A graduate of Dana White's Contender Series, Kavanaugh is coming off the first loss of his professional career, having suffered a TKO defeat to Charles Johnson last August. Despite that setback, the UFC clearly sees potential in the young flyweight, as he now finds himself thrust into a main event against one of the most accomplished fighters in the division. For Moreno, the fight represents another chance to regain momentum and remind fans and matchmakers why he has long been considered the heart of the flyweight division. A strong performance in Mexico City could quickly place him back into #1 contender territory, while a win for Kavanaugh would instantly elevate him into the elite conversation. The UFC Mexico City card is shaping up to be a notable one overall, with additional appearances from fighters such as Daniel Zellhuber, Bobby Green, and Marlon Vera, adding even more intrigue to an event already carrying high stakes and strong local support. Khamzat Chimaev and Ciryl Gane have both been regular fixtures alongside a rising heavyweight prospect on the PFL scene, and that fighter recently pulled back the curtain on what those training environments are really like. Pulya Ramani, who is set to face Carl Williams at PFL Dubai Nurmagomedov vs. Davis on February 7th, spoke about his experiences working with elite-level talent and how those connections formed naturally through shared camps in the Middle East. Ramani explained that many top fighters gravitate toward the region when preparing for bouts, especially when their fights are scheduled nearby. According to him, the Middle East has become something of a hub where high-level competitors cross paths and sharpen each other's skills. He noted that numerous UFC fighters make their way there during camp, including Chimaev, whom Ramani described as more than just a training partner. He said they completed 2 full camps together for Chimaev's recent fights and built a strong bond in the process. Ramani also referenced working closely with Ciryl Gane during one of the French heavyweights camps, as well as training alongside undefeated light heavyweight Azamat Murzakanov, who shared a card with Gane at the time. The common thread, Ramani suggested, is mutual respect and an unspoken understanding among elite fighters. He emphasized that when the best in the world are serious about improvement, they tend to find one another. In his view, there is no mystery behind why these collaborations happen, as top-level athletes recognize quality instantly and benefit from training in an environment where everyone is pushing at the same level. For Ramani, those shared sessions are proof that iron truly sharpens iron, with everyone involved gaining from the intensity and depth of experience in the room. Meanwhile, Khamzat Chimaev continues to stir conversation outside the gym as well. The undefeated contender recently took another public shot at Alex Pereira, responding to ongoing talk of a potential super fight. Posting on social media, Chimaev compared their records and suggested that respect had been lost due to what he views as excessive talk from Pereira's camp. Chimaev has made it clear that he wants a showdown with Pereira on the rumored UFC White House card in June, but Pereira appears focused on securing an even bigger clash, campaigning instead for a marquee matchup against Jon Jones in what could be one of the summer's most anticipated events. Lupi Godinez is on the verge of a UFC title shot. But first, she must get past one of the strawweight division's toughest tests. On April 11th at UFC 327 in Miami, the Mexican-Canadian contender faces Tatiana Suarez in a matchup that could determine the next challenger for the belt. Riding a 2-fight winning streak and ranked 7th, Godinez understands that this fight may define the trajectory of her career. She enters the bout following decision wins over former champion Jessica Andrade in August 2025 and Julia Palastri earlier that year, results that solidified her place among the division's elite. Suarez, ranked 2nd, rebounded from the first loss of her career with a unanimous decision over Amanda Lemos, reasserting herself as a serious title threat. For Godinez, a victory would likely place her directly in line for a championship opportunity. The strawweight landscape has shifted significantly in recent months. Zhang Weili vacated the title to pursue flyweight gold, and Mackenzie Dern claimed the vacant belt with a win over Virna Jandiroba. Godinez, who previously lost a decision to Dern, sees a clear path to redemption if she can get past Suarez. She has openly stated that this is the fight she needs to win to reach her goal of becoming champion. Much of Godinez's recent success has come since returning to Vancouver to train at WKX, where she began her career. Under the guidance of her coaches, she has refined her game through constant self-review, recording training sessions and making small adjustments that have paid off on fight night. She often compares her preparation to learning choreography, drilling movements until they flow naturally once the fight begins. Suarez remains a dangerous challenge, owning an 11-1 record with 7 UFC wins and a history of dominant finishes. At 32, Godinez believes she is in her prime and credits training near family for helping her stay happy and focused. A win in Miami would be the biggest of her career and likely secure a title shot against Dern, bringing her one step closer to the championship she has been chasing. The question settles, heavy and unavoidable, a specter in the welterweight air. Is Shavkat Rakhmonov being meticulously sculpted by a cruel fate into the UFC's most poignant and profound what-if? His pristine 19-0 record, that breathtaking tapestry woven with the threads of 18 violent and inventive finishes, no longer reads as a resume of future conquests. It is transforming in his absence into a museum piece, a collection of perfect, isolated artifacts from an exhibition that closed just as the main attraction was being unveiled. His surgical removal of the official rankings is not a demotion. It is the bureaucratic, coldly logical seal on a deeply human tragedy of timing. He didn't merely lose his spot on a list, he has been severed from his own destined timeline, watching from a medical table as the narrative he was meant to star in races ahead without its protagonist. That last fight, the gritty decision win over Ian Machado Gary, is now revealed as a cursed masterpiece, a painting whose vibrant colors hide a crack in the very canvas. Every leg kick absorbed, every twist on that compromised joint we now view with the awful clarity of hindsight was a down payment made in the currency of his own physical capital. He got that victory, and the phantom title shot it promised, with the structural integrity of his knee. And what did that transaction yield? The promised shot against Belal Muhammad evaporated. The championship itself was passed like a hot potato from Muhammad to Jack Della Maddalena to the conquering Islam Makhachev. The man he defeated, Gary, now literally occupies his vacated ranking. The sport's relentless machinery, heartless and efficient, has already whirred and recalibrated, filling the vacuum. Michael Venom Page slinks back into the welterweight top 15 on a technicality. New contenders forge their narratives with every main event. The Nomad transitions from urgent, looming threat to a nostalgic rumor, a fighter discussed in the past tense, even as he fights his most grueling battle in physiotherapy. He may return, of course. He may even win, his otherworldly talent perhaps vast enough to overcome the hiatus. But the what if is already being written in the margins of every welterweight headline. It is the haunting, persistent specter of the flawless, creative finishing machine that vanished into the shadows at the very moment of its intended coronation. It leaves us to forever wonder, with a tinge of sadness, about the untouchable heights a perfectly healthy, ever-advancing Rakhmonov might have reached in the chaotic, bloody kingdom he was born to rule. The greatest what-ifs are not born from a lack of skill or heart, but from a catastrophic collision of peak ability with irreversible circumstance. The path before him now is not the red carpet to glory, but the long, hard road of a challenger once more, with the ghost of his own lost inevitability as his most persistent and formidable opponent. Nick Diaz insists his fighting story is far from finished, even after years away from competition and a turbulent personal journey that nearly derailed his career entirely. The former UFC title challenger, now 42, has not competed since 2021, and updates about his life have been rare. Recently, however, Diaz spoke candidly during an interview at the Baja Rehab Center in Baja California, Mexico, where he opened up about his recovery from substance abuse, his renewed commitment to sobriety, and his belief that he still has championship glory ahead of him. Despite the long hiatus and the doubts surrounding a possible return, Diaz sounded unwavering in his confidence. He said he fully expects to fight again and believes he can become a world champion once more, framing the challenge as simpler than it used to be. According to Diaz, fans would be seeing a completely different version of him, both mentally and physically, shaped by everything he has endured in recent years. Diaz's last realistic chance at a comeback came in 2024, when he was booked to face Vicente Luque at UFC Abu Dhabi. That bout was first postponed due to travel complications and later rescheduled for UFC 310 in Las Vegas. Ultimately, Diaz withdrew from the fight for undisclosed reasons and was replaced by Themba Gorimbo, extending his absence from the octagon and fueling speculation that his fighting days might be over. In his prime, Diaz was one of the most respected and feared welterweights in the sport. He captured the Strikeforce welterweight title in 2010 and later transitioned to the UFC, where he challenged Georges St-Pierre for the undisputed belt and Carlos Condit for the interim title. Looking back, Diaz credits his intense focus and refusal to believe he could be stopped as key factors in both his success as a fighter and his ability to stay sober today. He explained that he has always believed he would improve year by year and day by day, regardless of obstacles, whether those came in the form of opponents or personal struggles. During the interview, Diaz acknowledged abusing marijuana and alcohol in the past, while maintaining that he never struggled with harder drugs. Still, he admitted that being surrounded by people who did abuse those substances was enough to frighten him and push him toward change. He strongly advocated for treatment, reflecting on the many friends he lost along the way and expressing regret that he never had the chance to help them before it was too late. For Diaz, witnessing those deaths up close became a turning point that forced him to confront the direction his life was heading. Diaz revealed that he had previously managed to stay sober for 3 years before relapsing, eventually recommitting to sobriety through rehab. Now he views that period as more than just a battle with unhealthy habits, recognizing that it also placed him and others in real danger. He described moments when armed individuals showed up near his home, situations that made him genuinely fear for his life, and ultimately convinced him that he needed to remove himself from that environment entirely. After severing ties with agents and distancing himself from people he once trusted, Diaz chose rehab, even though he described his earlier sober stretch as extremely difficult. Now back in California and continuing his recovery, he remains convinced that he can still compete at the highest level. He closed by thanking his fans for sticking with him through the chaos and promised that when he does return, the goal will be nothing less than winning another world title.
Under Dana White's leadership, the UFC has secured landmark media deals and embraced influencer-driven marketing, but a growing segment of the fan base believes the promotion has lost sight of what once made its press conferences must-see events. The recent UFC 325 pre-fight presser in Sydney has become a flashpoint for this criticism, with fans and observers lamenting the sterile, predictable nature of the modern media session. The frustration was crystallized in a social media post by the account No Context Ariel Helwani, which mocked the repetitive and shallow line of questioning directed at headliners Alexander Volkanovski and Diego Lopez. Just tried watching the press conference to get a little hyped for the fight. Questions were, "Hey, Volk, are you gonna win? How does it feel? Are you excited to fight in Australia? How does it feel fighting in front of your people?" UFC press conferences have become completely pointless and so boring lately. This sentiment highlights a stark contrast with the promotion's earlier eras, when personalities like Conor McGregor, Chael Sonnen, and Michael Bisping transformed press conferences into electrifying spectacles that drove pay-per-view sales and captured mainstream attention. Today, many fans argue that the sessions have become formulaic, plagued by safe, obvious questions that elicit equally safe, rehearsed answers from fighters. The issue is compounded by the UFC's strained relationship with certain segments of the media. The most famous case is that of journalist Ariel Helwani, who was banned from UFC events, a move widely perceived as retaliation for his aggressive reporting, though the promotion cited his early break of Brock Lesnar's UFC 200 return as the official reason. This has created a chilling effect, with fans believing that only compliant reporters who avoid tough questions are granted access. Not a single current MMA media member is brave, professional, or smart enough to ask a real question. Why? Because real questions might get you attacked by a fighter or banned by Dana, one fan commented. The declining engagement is reflected in viewership numbers. While iconic pressers like the one for UFC 205 have garnered over 9 million views on YouTube, more recent events struggle to reach even 1 million. Even the monumental UFC 300 presser managed only 1.2 million views, a strong number by current standards, but a fraction of the interest generated in previous eras. Some fans also point to matchmaking as a root cause, arguing that compelling rivalries naturally generate better press conference drama. It's because the matchups are very bad, make good matchups, and press conference is fireworks, one user noted. Others lament a broader shift in the sports culture under parent company TKO, with one writing, "2025 was my last year watching anything UFC, TKO, Zuffa related. The sport in the hands of TKO today is barely recognizable compared to 10 years ago." As criticism mounts, the central question remains: what can or will Dana White and the UFC do to re-inject the authenticity, tension, and excitement that once made their press conferences a pivotal part of the fight week experience? For now, the consensus among a vocal portion of the fan base is clear. The current product is missing the spark that once helped propel the sport to new heights.